Welcome to this Water Adaptation Community webinar. My name is Åse Johannesen, and I'm a Senior Program Officer at the Global Center on Adaptation. I will introduce you to the chair of this webinar. But first, about the Water Adaptation Community. We're part of the Global Center on Adaptation, which is an international organization working as a solutions broker to accelerate action and support for adaptation solutions. Founded in 2018, our global office is hosted by the Netherlands in Rotterdam, with regional office in Africa, South Asia, and Asia Pacific, and a knowledge and research hub based in Groningen in the Netherlands. The Water Adaptation Community is a global platform for sharing, developing, and exchanging insights, knowledge, and resources on the crucial role that water plays in adaptation. In 2023, the Water Adaptation Community will support the International Panel on Deltas and Coastal Areas, which you will hear much more about in this webinar. Later today in the discussion, we're looking for your input on what activities we can organize to support the Pacific Islands specifically and their climate adaptation and resilience building. And the Water Adaptation Community can organize various meetings and discussions, online webinars and exchanges for this purpose. But now, to chair this webinar, including the discussion, I would like to welcome the distinguished Dr. Nidhi Nagapatla. She's Senior Fellow and Cluster Coordinator for Nature, Climate and Health at United Nations University, UNUCRIS in Belgium. And with over 20 years of work experience, she has led, coordinated and implemented transdisciplinary projects in various geographical regions of Asia, Africa, Europe, Americas, affiliated with Oxford in the UK and Leibniz in Germany, and McMaster and Canada universities. Also a guest professor at Universidad Mayor de San Andrés in Bolivia, and visiting professor at Imo State University in Nigeria. And she has published over 200 papers. Please, Dr. Nagapatla, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of the participants who are joining us from various parts of the world. I'm very delighted to be chairing this very special webinar on Frontlines of Climate Emergency, Large Ocean States and Small Islands. Today, we are very delighted to bring together leaders, water governance experts, and practitioners from these regions to share knowledge and good practices for governance, policy development, and locally led resilience and adaptation. We're grateful to the Water Adaptation Community to organize this event and to support this discourse on these regions and remote states that are most exposed to the impacts of climate change, wherein communities and populations in these regions live in vulnerable settings created by disasters and other development shocks. Capacity gaps are common, whether it is human, technical, or financial. And the need for more bottom-up approach is listed as a priority. We will hear many interesting things from our list of panelists who are with us today, including some about the new coalition on International Panel of Deltas and Coastal Zones. To accelerate the discussions we had recently in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt on the sidelines of COP27 to put ocean agenda on the front line of climate discourse and communities in large ocean states and small islands as in the front lines, those who are in the front lines of climate emergency, their agenda on priority. So without much delay, I would like to introduce my first panelist, Dr. Amit Chani from Water Authority of Fiji, who will provide us with a summary and outcome of the 6th ministerial meeting of water ministers from Pacific Water and Wastewater Association in the context of water adaptation. Over to you, Dr. Chani.
Thank you, Nidhi, and Bula, everyone. As Nidhi just introduced, my task here is to just introduce you to, or provide you with a summary of the 6th Pacific Water Ministers Forum that Fiji had the joy of hosting just a few weeks back on the 14th and 15th of November. But before I do that, I just wanted to give you a quick overview of the Pacific Island states. We are home to about 2.5 million people living on hundreds of islands spread over the vast Pacific Ocean. If you think about Pacific Islands region, it covers about 15% of Earth's surface. And we do have a lot in common in terms of shared water security challenges and solutions. And when it comes to climate change, it's also probably worth mentioning that Pacific Island states contribute less than 1% of global emissions. However, when it comes to the impact of climate change, we are facing the brunt of it. So the 6th Pacific Waters Minister Forum was held in Fiji, and it was attended by ministers and senior officials representing ministers from Cook Islands, Fiji, Niue, Papua New Guinea, Samoa, Solomon Islands, Vanuatu, American Samoa, Kiribati, Marshall Islands, Nauru, Tonga, Tuvalu, and states of Micronesia. I think it's probably not a secret, and all of you would be familiar that the Pacific Island states experience some of the world's highest exposure to the risks of natural disasters. Within the last decades, some significant cyclones have hit the region. Cyclones like Pam, Winston, Harold, Yasa. There's some of the names of within the last decade, these cyclones have hit Fiji and other Pacific Island states. In addition, two of our fellow countries, Kiribati and Tuvalu, are currently dealing with climate change related drought. So the need for adaptation for us is not a distant scenario. For us, it is in fact needed today. A significant part of our 2.5 million population lives in rural and remote islands. And there's also a sizable informal urban communities living outside of centralized water and sanitation services. When you think about sea level rise and its significance as a challenge for Pacific Island states, it would become quite obvious when you think about the fact that many of Pacific Island states are just a few meters above sea level. And more than 50% of our population lives within 1 kilometer from the coastline. So it is already having impacts on the coastal settlements in the region. And the Ministerial Forum noted this challenge and called for urgency of scaling up on national and regional investments to support the science and infrastructure to build the local capacity that we need to build climate resilience. Building climate resilience infrastructure, enabling resilient communities and settlements that can withstand the adverse climate impacts that we are already facing now. In addition to natural disasters and need for resilient infrastructure, there are other serious water and security resilience challenges that the region faces, such as impacts on groundwater caused by drought, over abstraction, as well as saltwater intrusion, surface water challenges by pollution, mineral extraction. There is also essential infrastructure needs, renewal needs caused by climate impacts. And something unique to particularly small island states is the global supply vulnerability. So when you think about how far we are from the nearest land, big landmass, the impact of global supply chain vulnerability triggered by COVID-19 and then subsequently through the war in Russia, it is having impact on access to materials and cost of chemicals, for example, necessary for water treatment. And that is a significant challenge for small island states in the Pacific. The Ministerial Forum did deliberate on our journey towards achieving the SDG 6, and the forum noted that the Pacific Island region is collectively off track to meet SDG 6 targets. And to bring it on track, accelerated efforts are needed at all levels to prioritize urgent action on sustainable financing, data and information, capacity development, innovation, and governance. And just to give you an idea about the need for finance in particular, in 2017, Government of Fiji did a climate vulnerability assessment of Fiji's public infrastructure. And the aim of this was to understand the threat and what needs to be done. So the work made it clear that Fiji alone needed in excess of $10 billion investment, and that was back in 2017 dollars, to improve climate resilience of its infrastructure. And when you look across the Pacific Island region, we need between 6.5 to 9% of GDP every year invested in the building climate resilience infrastructure to have any chance against the impact of climate change. And this is the kind of investment that simply cannot be done by existing government funds. And that was something that was very clear and loudly acknowledged by all the ministers at the forum. And they called on development partners to urgently support enhancing access to existing and emerging funding mechanisms such as the climate financing. I mean, it is not an exaggeration to say that the biggest challenge and what would make the biggest difference in improving climate resilience in the Pacific is access to finance. Ministerial Forum noted the concerns with serious impact of untreated and partially treated wastewater as well, because the focus over the past few years with SDG 6 has been primarily on access to drinking water, and wastewater has perhaps lacked a little bit attention, and it is something that needs urgent attention now. Untreated wastewater is actually damaging freshwater and marine ecosystems. It's impacting on fisheries, human health, and livelihood. So the ministers called for increased and targeted effort on wastewater management and sanitation, and they resolved to make the next 5 years as the quinquennium of sanitation action in the Pacific. And Sanitation Challenge actually provides an opportunity for leapfrogging for small island states, finding alternate pathways suitable for local solution, bypassing traditional stages that developed countries went through. And sanitation is, innovation, non-sewage sanitation solutions will be a must for Pacific Island states to address the sanitation challenge. And finally, the Ministers Forum recognized that the forthcoming UN 2023 Water Conference in March is a critical forum for us to raise the region's voice on water. And the Ministers Forum resolved that through their communique that was agreed, the resolution from the meeting will be presented at the UN 23 Water Conference on behalf of the Pacific Water Ministers by participating Pacific Island country representatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Channan, for giving us a very comprehensive account of water security challenges in the region. I'm glad that you emphasized on interlinkages and intersections, and also not ignoring the role of wastewater and groundwater challenges that have been comparatively under-reflected in the water security discourse. I was also glad to hear that there has been agenda setting and prioritization exercise through your association, and that is good news for the meeting that will be convened in the March of 2023 by UN, and we look forward to see some of these issues are taken note of and are given the due recognition, and financial gaps are also bridged during such discussions. With that, a few words, I'd like to take the opportunity to share some of the oversights from my own work related to this webinar and the topics that we are covering in the scope of this webinar. So I'll share my screen to give you some account of the challenges that have been faced by small island developing states in particular. And just bear with me while I upload my presentation. Okay. So as we are talking about mapping opportunities, setting priorities, and also managing expectations, we understand that the COP27 has given us some kind of hope on the global pledge to bridging the financial gaps required for adaptation and resilience building in most vulnerable settings around the world. These two pathways of managing the opportunities and expectations at the same way could go a long way for setting priority agendas for these regions. And why is this even important? I think we could also take a note of all the leveraging platforms, agendas, commitments we already have in place. The World Economic Forum, for example, in 2015, started to put climate crisis, water crisis at the forefront of global crisis reports. The Sustainable Development Goals at the same time had a placeholder for climate action, life below water, or very specific agenda on coastal communities through that. The other international reports also supporting this agenda of looking into these specific regions. The other multilateral, intergovernmental agendas like the ecosystem decade on restoration. So this is just a kind of a context before we got into SDG 14 in particular, giving the whole information data points, as you see on the screen, about the relevance of ocean communities, coastal agendas in the sustainability discourse. Also talking about the economy that comes from these regions and the set of targets to achieve the gaps, both in technical capacity, financial and human capacity to have a healthy ocean for all. In this particular line of multilateral and environmental agreements, the latest last year, we saw the launch of the UN Decade on Ocean Science for Sustainable Development with its 10 principles and a lot of emphasis on making it more inclusive, especially taking note of small island developing states and the challenges that are very specific to these regions. So with that context, in the same time, the climate emergency discourse is also kind of taking shape, is maturing. There's no single definition of what is climate emergency, but largely it is, it's hinged on carbon neutrality by 2030. But in the recent years, we have seen that disaster risk reduction has been a part of its extended mandate. And from the Pacific region, we see that many countries and states and communities have also used the climate crisis to declare climate emergency and thereby accelerate and fast track climate action. I'll give you some insights from the work that we conducted for small island developing states in understanding how different indicators outlined in the SDG portfolio are performing. And if you see in terms of the number of people affected in millions, as an aggregate of the 38 small island developing states, you can see there has been quite a significant rise from 1970s. And in terms of indicators, if you see the lower end of this table, most of the sheet is red. So the indicators have really been showing sign of crisis. And to take this scientific assessment message, information and knowledge to the next level, the idea of our work is also to do the science policy bridging in very specific context to generate policy briefs that can provide evidence-based base for taking right and just policy decisions. So we have been doing that work in the region. In terms of institutional and policy analysis, it is also important to understand that water and climate crisis are acting in tandem. So not just providing stakeholders and communities with information and knowledge, but also a smart strategy on how to transform theory on water security or climate security into effective action. In doing so, we have been able to understand the role of the Samoa pathway that was endorsed in 2014 and has been a regular mechanism for supporting multi-stakeholder partnerships in the region. And I think these leveraging platforms can give an acceleration to existing agenda, to setting priorities, but also We have done some more comprehensive assessment on intersections and interlinkages between the inflow and outflow of metabolic systems in the island, by which I want to take your attention to my panelist, Dr. Channan, who also talked about wastewater treatment, who talked about the global supply chain vulnerability. So all these are impact factors or dimensions that directly or indirectly impact the sustainability of an island system. So to be able to deconstruct that complexity, we have done some assessment and taken that assessment into kind of a policy discourse at different forums. In terms of interventions, we have been supporting specific industrial and livelihood diversification systems, and specifically the seaweed aquaculture systems in some of these large ocean states and island systems, by setting sustainability guidelines in line with the blue economy and ecosystem-based adaptation solutions. So not just giving a diagnosis of problems, but also providing solutions that could help mitigate. And I'm sure we'll hear from some of the other panelists what other best practices are being put into action to mitigate some of the agendas, some of the challenges we have outlined, and again to understand that policy support systems should be supported in tandem to ensure that science evidence feeds appropriately and effectively into policy discourse. And before I close, I just want to give you a reflection of some of the discourse I heard at the COP27 Ocean Pavilion, but also on dedicated sessions to small island developing states and larger ocean states within the framework of the resilient planning. The framework for resilient planning development of the Pacific was mentioned in the context that it was a lot of, it provides a guiding and a foresight framework for integrated approach to address climate change and disaster risk management. So Pacific Island has been also quoted as a reference point in regard to this framework that already exists and has been endorsed by some of its member states. And Pacific Islanders also presented the historic declaration to the leaders at COP. And this Cure Climate Emergency Declaration that talks about many interesting process, especially with this bottom-up agenda, has gained some traction with the financial commitments that were being discussed with regard to these regions. And directly from the Ocean Pavilion, where we were also discussing about technological innovations, use of information and communication tools to embrace community-led initiatives into these larger agendas. And I might take the opportunity to close my intervention with the words from Fiji's climate activist Leventa Jalico-Segus, who says and reiterates that climate change is just not threatening the biophysical, but also the social fabric of the Pacific communities. And that is why the pledges, the commitments, the financial gaps to fulfill adaptation and resilience agenda is a matter of justice, and not just a matter of obligation for many of these small island developing states and countries, such as those in the Pacific. Thank you so much. And after this quick overview, I'd like to bring my next panelist, Mr. Amit Singh, who's a project development specialist in the Regional Pacific NDC hub of the Pacific Community, who will give us some insights about mainstreaming water into NDC's nationally determined contributions, emphasizing on solutions, gaps, and opportunities in water adaptation. Mr. Singh, is yours.
Thank you, Nidhi. Okay, I'll just quickly share my screen. Share, okay. Okay, so it was good to hear from the two panelists, Dr. Channan and also from you, Dr. Nidhi, about the need to have the issues faced by the Pacific Island countries with regards to water in the region, but also how we could then manage this risk or this impacts of climate change on water in the region. And my presentation or my intervention here today in this webinar is to exactly say point out, how we have all these strategies, all these good activities planned in the national development plans, in the national discourse around climate change and how to address that, but then translating all those things into the highest communication, into the highest national communications, so that actions could be taken on it, and how we could do that. I mean, if we say that water is really critical and interventions in water is really critical, then it should be reflected in the nationally determined contributions. So today, what I'll do is, through my presentation, I'll try and take all of you through some of the nationally determined contributions in the region, and discuss how water is being captured in the NDCs, and some of the and also discuss some of the ways we could help Pacific Island countries better capture water as part of their NDCs. So let's start. Okay, I think Dr. Chandan has given a good overview about the Pacific region, the Pacific Island countries, our vulnerabilities and risks associated with climate change. So I'll skip this slide and go to the next slide. Okay, here what we see is, to discuss the rationale as to why we need to include water in the NDCs. I think it's very important to note that approximately 50% of our population live without access to basic drinking water facilities, and it's quite a huge number compared to the other regions of the world. And day in, day out, water-related extreme events are affecting the people of the Pacific Island countries through floods, through droughts, and these are some of the things that warranties action into mainstreaming water into NDCs or climate communications. We also see that more than 2/3 of the Pacific Island country population live without access to basic sanitation, and this number is quite high, given that most of our Pacific Island population live in rural areas where they are not connected to reticulated systems of water services, including wastewater services. The other important reason why we need to discuss about water and NDCs is the fact that a great number of our population live in the close proximity to the coast. So if you look at countries like, for example, Tuvalu, Tokelau, Kiribati, almost 100% of the population, they live within 1 kilometer of the coast. So given climate change, given sea level rise, we expect to see the changes in the coastal groundwater land systems for these countries. And most of the people in these countries who are staying in these countries, they are using this coastal groundwater lens system for potable water needs. So that will change, that will affect the livelihood of people, as well as the health security of the nation itself. Okay, going into the NDCs and discussing the NDCs of the Pacific Island countries, we can see that the Pacific Island countries, they have submitted their NDCs after signing the Paris Agreement, and then straight after that, some of them, I should say most of them, have went and updated their NDCs. So we see 70%, 71% of the Pacific Island countries that have submitted their NDCs, they went ahead in 2020, 2021, and 2022 to update their NDCs. And you can see in the table here that the countries that needs to update their NDCs include Cook Islands, for example, Kiribati, and Niue, which are currently undertaking a review of the NDCs in Palau. This graph here shows the NDCs, how it has integrated water into it, and if you group the interventions that are there in the NDCs into groups like water resource management and policy, water services, means of implementation, for example, how they have identified what activities they want to implement as part of related to water as part of the NDCs, energy efficiency consideration into water services and climate change co-benefit. Then we see that countries, for example, Vanuatu and FSM, they have quite well captured or integrated water as part of their NDCs. They have integrated or have especially listed interventions they want to list as part of their water services. They have quite well included interventions they want to carry out as part of water resource management as a whole at national level, but also to put in new policies in place. And also they have listed energy efficiency consideration in water services, for example, using energy efficient pump systems or less emission pump systems to supply water for that matter. So having said that, then if you look at this graph, what it shows here is that those countries that have updated their NDCs recently, for example, if you look at FSM and Vanuatu, we see they have integrated water, across a whole lot of activities in the NDCs. If you look at countries that have updated NDCs in 2020, 2021, you'll find that water has not been integrated as much as we would all want as part of the NDCs, and there are quite a few reasons for that. And I must say that NDCs as it is, these are the nationally determined contributions of the country, and what it means is that it solely depends on the country based on their national circumstances to include whatever they think is relevant as part of their NDCs to UNFCCC, because at the end of the day, they are the ones who are responsible for submitting progress or track reports against whatever they include in these communications to NDCs. So we see there are a few countries in the region that have quite well articulated water as part of their adaptation mitigation targets in their NDCs to UNFCCC, but there is a huge scope for improvement in the next iteration of NDCs from most of the other Pacific Island countries to integrate water to an extent where it becomes very obvious that the agenda for the region is water and water services and water resource management moving forward. If you look at the scope of activities that is been integrated in the NDCs by the countries, then you can see here there is a huge range of activities that these countries have prioritized. For example, if you look at Vanuatu, it ranges from wastewater projects, water services project, climate change co-benefits as part of their adaptation targets. They have outlined infrastructure projects, IWRM, policy consideration. They have also indicated the need for new water policies or reviewing current water policies. They have costed water sector investment, things like that. Similarly, if you look at FSM, they also have a quite huge range of activities they want to implement as part of their NDCs, and then bringing it and mainstreaming it into the NDC communications. But the other countries, for example, Fiji, Nauru, PNG, they also have a range of activities that they have prioritized as part of their NDCs and their communications to UNFCCC. So just a quick discussion on few things here. If you see the graph, the pie charts here, you can see the first one, water for adaptation, updated NDCs. Most of the countries, they have listed water as part of adaptation target. Almost 70% of those that have submitted their NDCs, they list and they recognize water as part of adaptation target, which could be comprehensive in the way they have discussed it, or just very generally they have said that they recognize that water is important part of the adaptation, and hence have listed it in the NDCs. If you look at the WASH in the updated NDCs, here you can see, about 20% of the NDCs or the countries that have submitted the NDCs, then they actually say WASH as part of the NDCs. So, a prioritization of WASH as part of the NDCs. It's missing in most of the countries' NDCs. For example, 80% of the time on the NDCs that have been submitted, we don't see WASH as a prioritized sector within the whole water sector. And then if you look at the energy efficiency consideration in water services in the updated NDCs, you see about 40% of them, they have consideration for energy efficiency in water services. So using, fuel efficient or low emission pumps or energy efficient technologies for water services. Whereas about 60% of the submitted NDCs do not have this consideration in their NDCs. So having seen that and having analyzed the NDCs, I think we can see there is opportunities these countries could tap in moving into the future where they submit their updated NDCs. So one of the things they could do is, they have the opportunity to integrate water in the next iteration of the NDCs, and countries that have not updated their NDCs, for example, Palau, Kiribati, and Cook Islands, after they've submitted their first NDCs, they now have the opportunity to include water as part of the NDCs and activities which they believe with regards to water sector they want to include in the NDCs. I think publication by EGWA on watering the NDCs, the recommendations are quite valid for Pacific Island countries, and it would be good to see how these countries, they take these recommendations and include that for integrating water in the NDCs. I think one of the other things we have seen in the region is the fact that most of the Pacific Island countries, they lack overarching water sector policy. And what this does is, if you don't have an overarching direction on the water sector in the country, there is no, let's say, ministry, or there is no entity or institution to prioritize water. And if you don't have any institution to prioritize water, for that matter, then no one is taking water agenda into climate actions, into actions that would be agreed by, at national level. So that is one of the other reasons why water is not prioritized as part of the NDCs. So we don't see a lot of water actions reflected in the NDCs. And I think if we are to move forward and have a resilient water sector, then we need to have first at the national level overarching water sector policies, which give mandates to particular institutions or ministries to coordinate the sector. The water sector in the region is quite uncoordinated. In the fact, at national level, they are quite uncoordinated. And to bring about, if you have to prioritize actions from this sector, it's very important that we first coordinate the sector and then work together to take away, priorities and strategies to be reflected in the NDCs. I think the other thing that could be done as part of this is capacity building on integrating water in the NDCs, and it could vary from country to country, from region to region. So again, that could be done. That could be done with the knowledge partners, with the universities, with the think tanks, or with the group that are taking or sharing knowledge about how to integrate water in the NDCs and how to advance the water agenda into climate actions. And I think the other very important action item for this would be guidelines and good practices on developing NDCs and in integrating water and the NDCs. I think what we have seen is that, and what we note from UNFCCC is that there is no set template for submitting NDCs to UNFCCC. The reason for that is, given NDCs are based on national circumstances. You cannot have a set template to ask countries to include certain things in their NDCs. So given that, I think what we see through, if you do the analysis of these NDCs, is that some of the countries that have followed similar templates, they tend to overlook or do not integrate water into the NDCs. And I think that's something that could be improved, maybe if you do a lot of awareness raising or capacity development in the region. And I think, you know, if it's just a matter that it has been overlooked, given that the template doesn't require it, then there's a huge potential to update our indices and include water, you know, based on our national circumstances. Then I'd like to just share the screenshot of the two NDCs from FSM and Vanuatu. And here in FSM, their NDCs, they reflect, you know, how much investment they are needing in their water services. I think it's a very good example, given that NDCs are the highest climate communications out of a country to UNFCCC. If you have this kind of tables in your NDCs saying that you exactly know where you're going to put interventions into water services moving forward in the next 5-10 years, it's targeted for climate finance. You can you can go to any donor and say that this is our need for water services. It is in our NDCs. It is our development plan, and we need it to improve water services in the country. So here FSM has costed their water services projects for different states as part of the NDCs and prioritized that and submitted that to UNFCCC. We also see, for example, in Vanuatu, where they have come up and said a lot as part of this table with regards to the commitments to the water they're making to in the NDCs. And you can see here, for example, 8.3.38, they say Vanuatu commits to ensuring that all people will have reliable access to safe and drinking water, and it's coming from their other policy documents, but also they have listed the conditionality part of it. So which one is conditional, which one is not conditional, or how much conditional it is, and also the finance required to do that. So I'm sharing these screenshots just to show that it is quite good to reflect in your NDCs, if they are doing iterations, to have a very targeted and quantified, let's say, targets in the NDCs with regards to water sector, rather than having very general sentence saying that we'll ensure that we manage our water resources and have equitable access. But if you have these quantified targets, it makes it very easy then for the countries to get finance or to entice climate finance institutions to fund some of these activities as part of the climate projects they undertake in the country. So I think that's all for me. From me. Thank you very much, Nidhi.
Thank you, Mr. Singh, for giving us a vivid account of integration of water security and climate action. This is all good news that increasingly there is a trend of integrating water services or water provisioning services into climate action planning and implementation. And with that, shifting from more of a regional perspective, let's hear a country perspective. And we have our next panelist, Ms. Mashina Abdul Rahman from Ministry of Environment, and she is going to give us an overview of Maldives' national strategy and action plan to manage interventions in exclusive economic zone. Ms. Mashina.
Thank you. Let me share my screen. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. It's an honor to share our experiences regarding our exclusive economic zone management. And I think this presentation would be a shift from the conversations we had so far, because my presentation will be mainly focusing on marine managed areas and how these interventions is ultimately leading into adaptation. So In terms of protected areas, I think protected areas play a key component as an adaptation measure because we are conserving key biodiversity areas and also areas that are resilient and has hope for future generations. So when we define a protected area, it's a geographically defined space and recognized and managed through a legally effective mechanism, and that has associated ecological services and also cultural values. In the Maldives, we are currently working on protecting 10% of our coral reef and 30% of mangrove ecosystems. And uh, in terms of protection, mangroves play a key role as carbon sinks. They store more carbon than forests combined together. So in terms of coral reef, similar to other Pacific nations, Maldives is a coral island state, and conservation and protection of coral reef is protection of our islands and vulnerable ecosystems. So we are hoping to uh, conserve and manage these areas. And so far, we have currently achieved 40% of these targets. And we have 79 areas protected that cover small areas in comparison to other countries, which is 547 square kilometers, but that is 30% of our coral reef. So I think when we are talking about 2% of the EEZ protection, we face a challenge because we are a large ocean state. To achieve this target, we need to protect a large area of our ocean. So this is our protected area declaration process. So to identify and declare a protected area is a long process because an area protection and managing needs certain interventions, and we are limiting some of the activities that are already ongoing. So we need proper stakeholder consultation and endorsement from other sectors such as fisheries and tourism as well. And we need to deliver certain information to the public regarding a protected area, where it is and what activities can be conducted and what activities are prohibited, and the reason and justification for protection. In the Maldives, currently we are working on a very ambitious goal of declaring 20% of our EEZ as no-tax zones. This is our contribution to the global community as a whole, being a large ocean state, and currently, even though we are uh, undertaking sustainable fisheries measures where we do pole and line fishing, we want to demonstrate to the global community that by protection we can contribute to conservation of species, as well as protection will lead to greater economic benefits such as increase in the fish catch and biomass of the catch. So as I've said before, if we take the percentages in comparison to the whole EEZ Maldives, although we have certain areas protected, it's very small. So we need offshore large marine protected areas. But even with the small areas and the areas that we hope to protect, we do have the laws and regulation needed for protection. But the challenge is implementation of these management plans. With the 79 areas protected, we have just 5 areas with proper management plan. And these areas are mostly located in the UNESCO Biosphere Reserve. Among 20 atolls in the Maldives, 3 atolls are designated as biosphere reserves. And throughout these systems, we have different types of management tools. In Haniparu, which is a marine protected area with globally significant manta rays, we have rangers and access permit mechanisms, and we do generate quite a bit of income through these managed areas. But in terms of wetlands and other remote islands management, we are hoping to move towards a co-managed area where community engagement is enhanced. Similar to other challenges, the major challenges we have are in terms of finance, human resource, and technology. And with the increase in protected area, I think we would never have enough finance or enough human resource to manage these areas. So we need to focus on technology and more innovative mechanisms for management. And in the existing protected area, the biggest challenge is resource use conflict. So where do we draw a line where we have a balance in terms of resource users and their access and rights to these areas, also while ensuring there is protection to the key goal that we aimed for protection. In this picture, you can see South Aryan Marine Protected Area, which is a whale shark aggregation site. But unfortunately, due to this protection and global being a globally famous area that can see whale sharks throughout the year, we have attracted a lot of tourism. And currently, we are facing a challenge where we are observing mass tourism in these areas. So we need to find a balance where management interventions are invested into this, where we limit the number of people that can visit these areas, but at the same time we will be impacting the livelihood of certain members of the community while doing this intervention. So this is one of the biggest management challenges. As we are moving forward, similar to other Pacific Oceans, we need large marine protected areas that to achieve the global targets for protection. So a large marine protected area is a protected area greater than 150,000 kilometers. But with these large marine protected areas, and offshore protected areas, and currently in the global community, we are also negotiating towards protecting beyond national jurisdictions. But the existing literature shows that with large marine protected area, we should be cautious because most of these areas end up being paper parks that have difficulty in surveillance, enforcement, and monitoring. So large marine protected areas can be a mechanism to achieve the global targets, but it could end up being a paper park. So we should take a necessary precaution in terms of management to ensure these are managed areas. So what are the opportunities? We hope that in managing the large marine protected areas, we are planning to use the existing resources for management. In terms of maritime security, I think similar to other countries, a huge portion of our national budget focuses on security and ensuring security. They have invested resources to ensure maritime security. So already invested facilities can be used to manage protected areas as well. And also we need to work together with existing partnership, like in terms of fisheries management and regional collaborations to ensure management of large marine areas. And the way forward that we would suggest is a better partnership in terms of technology and knowledge sharing, because there are countries that have the technology and enough resources that are already undertaking very advanced remote monitoring and surveillance. This is the area that we are currently focusing on in terms of managing these areas. Remote monitoring and surveillance, I think, will be the way forward for SIDS in managing large protected areas, because we will never have enough finances or enough people to monitor these areas. And ultimately, sometimes some monitoring mechanisms, such as using a vessel and patrolling, may be ultimately causing more emissions and causing negative impacts. So I think in terms of monitoring and surveillance, also we need to focus on low emission and more sustainable measures. And we need to ensure that investing in nature is also investing our natural capital. So by establishing and managing protected areas, we are investing our economy by protecting our fisheries and the tourism that our economy is dependent on. Thank you. That is my presentation. Feel free to send me an email if you have any question. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mashina. You have given us a very interesting account on at the national level on various dimensions that are very specific to the local context. I was very intrigued to hear your point on resource use conflict and your comprehensive description of how it reflects the Maldivian context. And it's nice that you pointed on the use of nature-based solutions and digitalization or digital governance in monitoring. And thanks for bringing our attention to partnership. And that's the very essence of SDG 17. With that said, before we move on from local to global, I would maybe request all our participants to prepare their questions. We'll soon be, after our last intervention, we'll be shifting into a question and answer session. And in the case you already have some burning questions, please use the chat function or the QA function to type your questions, and we'll try to address them as they match with the panelist. With that said, I also want to make a quick note that Mr. Paul Holtus will not be with us today. He was representing the World Ocean Council, and due to ill health, he sent his apologies. And if you have any particular question about the World Ocean Council, you can send it directly to us, and we'll make sure that Paul receives it, and we'll be able to provide you his answer by email or some other alternative ways. In that sequence, we'll now move on to Mr. Harm Durrell from Deltares, Netherlands. And transitioning from local to global, we will be hearing how from him how the pathway to UN Water Conference of 2023, how future coalitions and capacity building can be manifested or steered, accelerated through international panel on deltas and coastal regions, IPDC for short. And he will give us an account of this new coalition, and we'll learn how IPDC could be a new tool or modality to steer the agenda. Mr. Ham, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nidhi. Let me share my screen. Does everyone see my screen?
Yes.
That is yes.
Maybe I'm not in the presentation mode, but we're good.
Yeah,
we're good.
Yeah, it's in the good mode now. Yeah, thank you very much for being also part of this webinar. Really also excited to brief you, present you the IPDC initiative, the International Panels on Deltas and Coastal Areas, that is also including the small islands. My name is Harm Durrell. I'm the chair of the IPDC Secretariat, and I'm also working at Deltares. That's a non-for-profit research organization based in the Netherlands, and it's working globally, also in the Pacific region. The main objective also of the IPDC is accelerating climate adaptation action. And the initiative was taken by the Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management in the Netherlands, and it is supported by the Global Center on Adaptation, the Delta Alliance, and Deltares. The IPDC still is in shaping phase. This implies that we welcome every input that will help us in the final setup of the IPDC and its agenda to support climate adaptation in deltas, coastal areas, and small islands. And the IPDC is also financially supported by the Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management for the first phase, that is until 24, also to kickstart the IPDC activities. I think previous speakers already have mentioned it. Small islands are extremely exposed to and vulnerable to climate change, facing also many challenges to adapt to the changing climate and sea level rise. And that was also at the a key message from COP27, that there is an urgent need for turbocharged climate adaptation action. There is no time to waste. And collaboration is also at all levels is essential to undertake action now to be ready for the future. And I won't repeat all the challenges that are there, but I think you are already familiar with that. The collaboration is exactly what the IPDC will do, facilitating collaboration through partnerships and coalitions, working together on the acceleration of climate adaptation action, delivering tangible results, addressing the needs of requirements of the countries, and in this case also the small island states. To achieve this, the IPDC will bring 3 levels together to facilitate integrated adaptation planning and to bridge the implementation gap and make acceleration real. We have the champions group, that is the policy and finance level. We have also the international science panel, that is bringing the top level scientists and experts on climate adaptation together. And the 3rd level is also the implementation level, consisting of agencies and networks that are responsible for and supporting climate adaptation actions on the ground. So the champions group consists of high-level leaders from governments and financial institutions for also political and financial commitment and leadership. They are playing a key role in bringing water to the heart of climate adaptation action by accelerating climate adaptation agendas, the integrating of water in the national adaptation plans, and also supporting in the implementing of the plans. But also important is that they play a role in supporting other countries and small island states by supporting the knowledge and bringing also best practices forward. At the COP27, we had already a soft launch of the Champions Group with the ministers from the Netherlands, in Egypt, and Bangladesh, Colombia, but also from the CEOs from the Asian Development Bank and the Green Climate Fund. So we already made a kind of start of the Champions Group. But we are still discussing also with other countries and also other financial institutions like the World Bank and the Inter-American Development Bank as well, to be also committed to this IPDC. Science layer, that is the international panel, top-level scientists and adaptation experts linking shared knowledge to local planning and implementation needs. For example, through downscaling IPCC scenarios to a very local scale to quantify the climate risk on the mid and long term, but also provide support in developing adaptation pathways, solutions, tools, guidances, and so on. And the 3rd layer then the action holders, consisting of implementation agencies and networks. They are working through coalitions and partnerships together with the international experts in supporting integrated planning and actions on the ground. And they play also an important role in upscaling promising solutions and technologies. So the IPDC will focus on 6 themes. 5 themes are on the global acceleration framework. That will also be the key topics at the UN Water Conference next year. And we added a 6th one, the small islands, because of the specific adaptation challenges. And the IPDC will build coalition with networks to work together on the selected themes. Recently, we have started the discussions with networks listed on this slide. And if you want to contribute, please let me know after this session. As mentioned, we are currently in the process of designing the IPDC. The official launch will be at the UN Water Conference at March 23. Meanwhile, the members of the Champions Group and the IPDC Secretariat will work together in this journey to the EM Water and having regional workshops and webinars like this one in building partnerships and defining the IPDC agenda for the first phase until the Delta conference that we want to organize in March 24. And the IPDC agenda will list all the needs and requirements for knowledge and tools and guidances and innovations to support adaptation planning and the implementation of actions. Well, there's a lot on this slide, but I think the key message from this slide is that the IPDC is also a long-term commitment to contribute to meeting the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. And we have also to monitor our progress, important milestones at the COP27, on the COP meetings, but also at the Delta conferences that the IPDC will organize every 2 years. To summarize, so I think that the most important message is that the IPDC want to bring water to the heart of the climate action by sharing knowledge to local action, but also in harmonizing a portfolio of projects to be implemented and financed. I think the most, you can follow us at our website or at our LinkedIn page. So we welcome your contribution and commitment to launch the IPDC at the UN Water Conference. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Harm. I think this sounds very promising as an additional modality to steer and accelerate the action for change. And I think maybe this is the time that we start some discussion, ask each other some questions to see how do we best integrate agendas, how do we understand what are the key impacts that need support, key climate change impacts that would need support from an initiative like IPDC, and also from the larger water adaptation community per se. And I would request all my panelists to please switch on their video so we could have maybe some discussion on IPDC, the role of IPDC as they would see fitting with their agendas, the programs, the projects or activities that they are currently steering, thinking, have been initiating to bring together water security and climate resilience agendas. So maybe all the panelists, if you are there, please switch on your video so we can start some discussion. And all the participants who are with us listening to these interventions, if you have any question directed to the panelist, this is the opportunity to ask. But before maybe I pick up the question, I'll take the liberty as the chair to ask my question, and starting with my panelist from Maldives. So you said that there is a need for digital use of digital tools like satellite surveillance. Has the state or your department made any kind of agenda or any kind of plan to initiate this vision of using technology? And if you can share some insights. I also would maybe take your insight or reflection on how this also fits with an integrated technological interventions like early warning systems, because sometimes the integrated technology can help you monitor, but also to give you some forecasting or some early warning signals. So if you can share some of these technologies that you have put into action.
Yes, thank you so much for that question. In terms of putting it into action, we are currently scoping the technologies used in other countries and we have identified that there are sort of already existing systems in terms of marine traffic and monitoring and vessel monitoring devices. Those existing technologies can be incorporated into our sort of management and enforcement without investing any additional infrastructure. So I think in terms of fisheries management, also currently in the Maldives, it is mandatory for all registered vessels to have a vessel monitoring device installed in them. Also, there are additional upcoming technologies that we are at a very early stage of scoping, and we are currently working with the World Bank on a project called Digital Maldives. And next week, actually, we will have the scoping workshop on that. Hopefully, after that workshop, we will have a more clear answer to your question. In that, we will be discussing the existing technologies in other countries, but we understand that remote monitoring and surveillance in terms of underwater drones or existing satellite or vessel monitoring, this is a very upcoming and new technology that is growing very fast. And also in terms of telecommunication, also there are tools that we can use that are very cheap. For example, even a phone can be used in tracking a device. So we can identify friendly vessels and others. I differentiate between friendly and unfriendly vessels through that mechanism. And also we have many remote islands that we need surveillance. So there are solar powered, very high tech cameras as well that are very efficient. So hopefully in the upcoming days we will have a more clear answer, but I think this is an opportunity that we need to think outside the box, because there are innovations and it is developing very fast.
Thank you, Mashina. And maybe I'll turn to my next panelist, Ham, to understand your insights on how IPDC is planning to leverage existing knowledge and initiatives. You did give us some brief overview, but have you identified some ongoing initiatives or agendas at the regional level for the Pacific or other regions of small island, large ocean states that can be tapped into to accelerate action and impact? Though I understand it's early days for IPDC, but perhaps some reflection would add to our audiences to understand what's happening.
Yeah, thank you very much for your question. So we also within 2 weeks' time, we also will have a meeting on in the Caribbean region, also to discuss the challenges there. I think at the small islands, what I also mentioned, are extremely vulnerable and to climate change. And I think that was maybe also Mike was preparing also a question also to Mr. Ahmed Singh. I think you made a very nice overview of mainstreaming water into the NDCs and NABs. But I also know that the islands also struggling a lot in identifying, let's say, also more clearly on what are the climate risks also on the long term for the islands. And we know that there will be sea level rise and that the climate change is also accelerating much faster than we are also expecting. And I think, yeah, in that sense, it's good also to develop some strategies related to develop kind of adaptation pathways also for the small islands. And I think that is extremely challenged to have this. And I think that what IPCC can do also in that sense is also bringing the scientists together to map also more clearly what are the climate risks and what are the opportunities also for the small islands to adapt to those challenges. And I think that there is also a lot of knowledge available, but sometimes also difficult to have access to. And I think that is what IPDC want to do is bringing this together by bringing also the people together.
Thank you, Harm. I'm glad that IPDC is also embarking on knowledge catalysis role, and maybe I give you the opportunity to ask our panelists from the region and Maldives to if you want to understand from them how do they see the role of IPDC in supporting their agenda. Do you also want to ask the panelists if they see how they see the IPDC? So I give the floor to you, Harm, too, maybe if you want to specifically engage on how our country and regional partners see IPDC.
Is this a question to me, Nidhi?
No, I just wanted to, if you have any questions for the panelists, that's I wanted to say that.
Well, I think for me, it's also important to know, let's say, what are, let's say, also the main issues, and what I also I've really appreciated also the presentation, for example, by Amit Singh, that was also very clear on how the Pacific Islands are bringing also water into, let's say, the NDCs and NAPs. But was also clear that there are also some islands that are still struggling and water is not there. So I was wondering what is the reason for and what does then, and how can then also IPDC support those countries to bring also water more to the heart of climate adaptation action.
Thank you, Ham. Thank you for that question. I think as I said earlier in the presentation, as far as we see, as far as NDCs are concerned, NDCs are nationally determined contributions, so it's determined by the countries on their national circumstances. So in one way or the other, we can say that we cannot force countries to have certain components of water in their NDCs. But having said that, I think it's also very important that if we raise awareness around having water in NDCs, especially to help the countries identify climate finance for their water-related projects, whether it's water security, organizing water at national level in terms of coordinating water sector, or anything of that matter. If these NDCs reflect commitments for the water sector, then it's very it becomes very good for the country in the sense that they have this mandate to approach donors to get climate finance. And I think IPDC in that sense can facilitate, as you said, options around knowledge sharing around that. We have seen if we do the analysis of NDCs for the other sectors, for example, transport sector, is the knowledge around transport sector, the way transport is captured in the NDCs it's been analyzed and done by various organizations or various group or networks. So I think if we are to advance the uptake of water in the NDCs, and the reason why I'm emphasizing that is because, and I've said that earlier on, is if we can integrate water in the NDCs, I think it's a success for a lot of water practitioners, not in the region, but around the globe, because then water becomes part of the national communications to UNFCCC or by our country. So I think that's where IPDC could support the Pacific Island countries, and also, also to support the countries, make that link between the national development plans, between the NEPs and other national documents, and translating that into the final, let's say, communications in this regard, which is the NDCs. So that gap that is there, how they could provide the Pacific Island countries in terms of capacity building, in terms of organizing, discussion like this. We very rarely find a discussion we are having today, to talk about these things, and a small discussion like this goes a long way to integrate water into NDCs, and for that matter to elevate water as part of our adaptation actions moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah, what the IPDC also wants to do is also bringing also the financial institutions to the table. And also then supporting countries also in let's say in harmonizing a kind of portfolio of projects that are supporting, let's say, the acceleration of climate adaptation action, and get it also financed. And I know that, for example, we also had discussions with ADB. They also have a large fund now launched to support climate adaptation action also for the Pacific Islands. So I think in that sense, we can also support the Pacific Islands, also building a good portfolio of projects that are also that ADB is also really keen in investing in. I think that is, and I think that could also be a very valuable contribution that IPC can deliver also to the Pacific Islands.
Yeah, I agree.
Dr. Chanan or Martino, do you want to add your reflections to this point by Harm before we move on to our next question?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, maybe Mushina and then Dr. Chanan.
Yeah, thank you. I totally agree with Mr. Amit Singh. I think we do have a opportunity here in terms of sharing experiences and lessons learned. And we do have, as small island states, we have common challenges and also individual and unique to other countries. And I think lessons learned, sharing a platform for sharing what we have learned and moving beyond pilot projects on what has worked and what has not. That is an important step for us. And capacity building is, of course, we also totally support that. And I think we are totally now at a state where pilot projects, we don't have time for pilot projects. Just let us know what has worked and let us do that, because we are running out of time.
Thank you, Mushina. Dr. Chanan.
I think Machina's absolutely summarized it really well. I don't think I can put it in better words. And I agree with what's been said so far. And I think what Hans just talked about in terms of creating a sort of portfolio of projects and getting access to or facilitating ADB or other funding partner funding of such projects would be a really, really meaningful way to use this collective effort.
So these are interesting reflections. I'm already coming in setting sort of priority agenda for IPDC, and it's interesting that there are avenues that can be tapped. There are priorities that can be set, and I am reminded of the discussion we had during the COP plenary that we have done diagnostics, and it's time to scale. It's time to accelerate action, and it's time to understand best practices, to scale them, to find financial partners, to have a buy-in from financial institutions to bridge their financial gaps. So I think there seems to be some consensus on how to move forward.
Yeah, and I also agree. So what also what was already mentioned now, I think it's clear that we have no time to waste. So, and I think and also learn. I think also what we should also do is also sharing the experiences, so that and IPDC will wants also to facilitate that. I think that is an important element as well as building also capacities. Because we don't have time for all kind of tryouts, or pilots or something like that. So I think that when we have, but we also want to invest, let's say, that is also real, bring also real solutions in terms that is also science-based, so that we don't waste also our funding for. So it doesn't say that all the projects that are identified are not good, but I think what is also needed now is that we move very fast in climate adaptation actions, and then we select those projects first that are contributing to that in a large extent, I would say.
Thank you. And I would like to take, as the chair, I'd like to take the opportunity to ask 2 questions to my panelists, and feel free to answer. For first question, I think with all the critique aside, COP27 has given us a mandate in terms of the funding that was pledged for loss and damage. The amount, the modalities are still an ongoing discussion, but it looks like IPDC could be that platform that can help to identify that matchmaking. Do you see the role of IPDC as fulfilling that function? Maybe I'll open that to all the panelists, including Harm, to give us some direction.
Oh yeah, that's a good question, I would say. I think it's good that let's say that we have, let's say, this funding also available. The difficulty, I think, is also how to bring it into practice, and I think through, let's say, working also together with the different countries, the governments, and we can maybe also define some guidance in how we can implement this in a way that it is not only funding, let's say, the actions that when you have a kind of disaster risk, or when there's a disaster, then you want to repair, but also then repair in such a way that it's also climate resilient, and not building back better, but building back better, I would say. But I think it's good that it is there. But I think, and we should also not waste time to find very complicated procedures. But I think some guidance is needed. Yeah.
Thank you, Harm. I open the floor for the other panelists to make their intervention if they should wish.
I think, if I may, in terms of the mandate for IPDC or in getting access to funds, the challenge out of the current COP is, the message is clear that there is the need to access funds is critical, and as Musina very nicely summarized, that the time for pilots and the time for discussions has gone. And I just reflect on my recent sort of exposure to a number of multilateral sort of bodies out there. A number of them come sort of talk to you about help you do the assessments and maturity assessments and vulnerability assessments. And the reality is we got half a dozen reports already telling me what needs to be done. I don't want to have one more conversation with another multilateral agency who can come and tell me what is my maturity assessment. What I do want is some real practical, access to funds so we can do things on the ground. And in whatever shape IPDC takes, what is important is that we don't want to replace multilateral bureaucracies who are sitting there just having conversations with another one. It needs to be different, and being different can only be by making that process more streamlined. And that is important, because you're just replacing one with another is not really the objective.
Thank you, Dr. Chanan, and I totally endorse your message of moving beyond diagnostics, and I'm sure we are well equipped on diagnosing things, but I think action is something that's pretty much on the agenda. Amit or Musina, do you have any quick point to this question, or we can move to question 2?
Yeah, I think,
of course. Amit, go ahead.
Thanks, Mushin. I think I totally agree with Dr. Chandan. In terms of IPDC should not be caught up in politics and diplomacy of climate change and multilateral parallel bodies or discussions. So yeah, I totally support that.
Mashina.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that what we look forward to is to learn from the experiences that we have so far, from the existing financial mechanisms. I think Dr. Chanan has highlighted the challenges. So even GCF, GAF, we are currently having so many financial bureaucracy and other diplomatic layers, and through the project preparation grant that takes almost 2 to 3 years, we have seen like infrastructure that needs adaptation measures, adaptation measures. When the preparation is done, almost half of it is already gone. So how many more years should we take to prepare again? So I think from the lessons learned, we need to work on a faster mechanism, and also based, not reinventing the wheel, but based on what we have done so far and what needs urgent action, just a measure that could work to address the challenges on the ground, rather than talking about what we have been talking for the past 30 to 40 years. I think IPDC can be and has the potential to be that platform.
Thank you, Mashina. Not reinventing the wheel. That's a good point and a good reminder. And that brings us to our last question for the panelists. We have talked about many dimensions, specifically from an institutional perspective, in the perspective of fulfilling obligations of multilateral environmental obligations, SDGs, Sendai framework, and many NDCs. But at some point, I think, have we missed talking about the bottom-up approach that we want to also see in the mix, to ensure that no one is left behind? I'd like to take some reflections on how communities are involved, as in terms of owning these solutions, in terms of being they're being incentivized if they are championing some of these solutions. So maybe some reflections from Maldives and from the Pacific, and how your overarching view on how that can be integrated in IPDC agenda, or more focus on community research.
Yeah, from the Maldives side, I think we have so far not given enough credit for the local and traditional knowledge that exists within the countries, and I think that is where the bottom to up top approach should start, where we have, although there is no scientific base on this knowledge, I think we should give official recognition for their knowledge and work in tandem with the science and local and traditional knowledge. I think that is where we should start.
Thank you, Mashina. Any more reflections?
I think I'll just share my experience working in the communities, especially in the adaptation sector here in Fiji. And I would say, if you integrate communities together with the nature-based solutions side of stuff, then you have a very good mix and sustainability of it moving forward. We have implemented a lot of projects here, looking after protecting our coastal communities, using nature-based solutions, working directly with the communities, supplying them with options to use nature-based solutions to protect their villages from sea level rise and saltwater inundation. So what it brings, what I have seen, and some of the lessons learned was that after one of the things is the project is so cheap if you involve communities and nature-based solutions to do that. The second and the most important one is it's sustainable. Sustainable in the sense that if something happens, let's say if they planted mangroves or vetiver or anything for that matter, if it dies out, then they can easily replace it. If you bring a contractor to do a nature-based to do a seawall, it's expensive. It's not sustainable in the sense that community is not involved because it's very specialized technical intervention. So if we are to involve communities in adaptation moving forward, I think it's always good to think about communities plus, think about places where they could be very useful and their knowledge about it. So I think nature-based solution combined with communities is a very good mix moving forward.
Thank you, Ahmed. Any last words from you, Dr. Chan?
Can I also add to that? I think I think also the local communities are also very important in climate adaptation action, and so that is also what the IPDC wants to also to build also some networks, also then in how local communities can also contribute, let's say, to the climate adaptation action. And I think also what we then also want to do as an IPDC is also to see how promising local solutions can be also upscaled and to maybe also to other regions or to other islands or to other countries as well. And so that I think that is also what we want to see happen. And I think what also maybe also back to also one of the previous questions, I think it's good also that we should not reinvent the wheel. That is also what IPDC is not aiming at. I think the national adaptation plans or that is also responsibility of the countries itself in the states. So that is not the role of IPDC to make new integrated plans, but what IPDC wants to do is then provide also some building blocks and knowledge and tools that can support also the integrated planning but also the actions on the ground. Yeah, I think that is also what I want to say about that. So.
Thank you, Ham. I think that's a really good set of words to close our discussion for today, and we can acknowledge the contribution of all the panelists. We also can understand that there are possibilities to remain connected, to share experiences, to be a part of IPDC as it evolves to be that modality that can help steer the agenda for large ocean states and small islands. And once again, thanks to all of you who joined us today to contribute to this discussion, and to all my panelists. And thanks again to the Water Adaptation Community and GAC for organizing this event, giving us the platform to exchange knowledge, to identify gaps, and to become collaborators or to become partners in the transformative agenda that we envision. Thank you so much.
Okay.
The session is now closed.
Okay, bye-bye.
Right.